This is Remo Daily, your daily dose of inspiration.
Ryan, I have to press you on your workspace before we dive into, design research and the work from home ergonomic assessment that I just took with your company. There's a lot that we have to share today, but you told us when we were preparing for the session that you designed your own workspace with the concept of biophilic design. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Correct.
Where an indoor space mimics an outdoor landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean concretely in your example? What is in your room that we can't see that makes this a biophilic room?
Sure. Yeah, I love to talk about this topic. And I know biophilic design sounds like a crazy complex thing. And there actually is some interesting science behind it. But you're right. It's basically helping the indoors to learn from the outdoors. In some cases, it means blurring the two. We just did a lengthy study on how homes are changing around the world. And in places like Sao Paulo, as an example, they often open up and the line between indoor and outdoor is less specific. But here in the States, we don't do as much outdoors. I do usually try to work outdoors as much as I can. But as far as the indoors, for me, it begins with natural light. And the good news is, of the 31,000 people that have used Herman Miller's work from home tool, Herman Miller is one of the brands within MillerKnoll. A vast majority of people have access to natural light in their home work setting. It was about 75, 76%. Next for me is plants. Now that's different. Actually, I think 54% of the people who use the tool said they don't have any plants in their environment. Plants are good for us. They absorb CO2. I actually keep a CO2 monitor right by my desk. I'm at 500 parts per million. I know that's pretty geeky, but there's good research indicating that when CO2 levels start to get higher, like above 1,000 parts per million, our cognition goes down. If you've ever been in a conference room that's jammed with people and you start feeling like this dull headache, and then you step outside and you're like, yes. Oh, that's oxygen. So plants are good for us. I have a very simple version of circadian lighting. So the circadian cycle is how the sun goes from very bright blue light in the morning to much lower intensity, warm light, red light in the evening. It's one of the reasons why we're told to not stare at these things when we're going to bed, because this is bright blue. There are some really sophisticated lights, but I didn't want to put the budget into it. So I went and got this light bulb called Scene Switch from Philips, where literally if you turn it on and off, it'll move from cooler blue to warmer red. Sometimes if like the house is packed with kids, which happens to us, and I lose access to the various TVs, I might even come in here to watch a little Netflix or whatever. And there's even a really like dim setting just to allow you to chill a little bit.
Wow.
And then, yeah, I am an aquatic geek. I got a tattoo of a fish on my arm. And so I have not one, but two aquariums, which I take endless crap about for some of my coworkers. But if you've ever seen aquariums in like the dentist's office or the doctor's office, it lowers your blood pressure, lowers your heart rate. So I have strategically placed one of them just past my camera. So don't get me wrong, I pay attention, but if it's one of those days, we will have those days where you're like, oh my gosh, it's my 4th hour meetings. Am I looking at you or am I looking at a beautiful fish? There's the question.
We will never know.
You'll never know. And so I'm just trying stuff. I cut my own work surface shape to try to accommodate one of my kids when they come in here for homework help. Yeah, it's just like for me, it's like a chance to make our research like really applicable to my own life, and there's something fun about that. It's like I'm not a handy person, so it's fun to kind of like experiment. But there's a bigger principle here, which is for most people, no one's going to come and improve their work from home situation unless you do it, and you don't need to be a researcher to do it. We tend to think of working from home, regardless of what type of a home it is, as happening in multiple places. So I mentioned I work outdoors, but I might work from if I'm reading something, I might go to the living room. If I'm feeling like I just need a break or a change of scene, I might go to our dining room. I have a height adjustable table, but if people don't, I usually say, take your laptop, go to your kitchen counter for 15 minutes, just stand up, move, and then think about how the different parts of your home can support your work better. So to my right is what we would just call a reference zone. So I've got just tons of old papers, books, printer, everything that I might need adjacent to me. But everybody's got to kind of think through this stuff for themselves. That was a really long answer.
Wow. Fantastic.
Sorry.
No, and what you saw in this little beautiful animation that Fletcher from our team did when we open Remote Daily, that is what I am in. So my little Zoom cave is part of my daughter's room, and she has it in the evenings and mornings and during the night, and I have it during the day. That means right now I'm kind of in enclosed space, but I also look out of the window. I see green trees, and it helps me a lot. And I love that you might just talk to fish. We don't know, or to us. It just depends. And Anne was actually asking about that standing desk, and I have been asking myself that question a lot. Is there a better or worse between sitting or standing? What do you say? What does the data say?
I mean, what's good is movement, right? So we like to say your next posture is the best posture. If you're going to be in one position for a longer period of time, sitting in a good ergonomic chair is better than standing. We work with a group of ergonomists, and one of them said to me once, "Don't forget, in An Officer and a Gentleman, they made him stand as punishment." I've never seen the movie. I don't know what she's talking about, but the principle was, if you've ever worked retail, standing on a retail floor for hours, it can be really rough on your body. Height adjustable tables are interesting because they can typically go from sit to stand. Some people are power users. A lot of people invest in it, don't think to use it. For me, I like the smaller adjustments. So I might, take this up to make sure that my sight lines are pretty good. But if I want to take it down a little bit to do a little bit more task-based work, I can do that. I do little small transitions throughout the day, but I don't actually usually stand up to work a lot because, like I said, I'll just go see the dog or go into the kitchen for a bit. At home, I have the luxury of a few different places I can go to work.
I would love to have a table with the camera, just like you did, that just, if I'm not interested in the meeting anymore, I just send it. It just goes out. The camera
could do
just
that.
moves
You
up.
could just be like, "Sorry, I don't know what's happening."
And there's like a big sorry sign above you that just comes into picture when you move up the camera. But Kara's actually asking a serious question about this. A lot of us don't have a lot of budget for our work from home setups, and now many employers are offering little stipends. Still probably not a lot for most cases, but Kara's asking, let's say you get a little stipend from your employer and you really want to get started getting into where you are right now, the zone, the perfect home office. What would be the top 3 things on the list that you would recommend to start with?
So there's a research partner of ours named Leesman. It's an organization out of the UK that has surveyed. I mean, we have pretty good data. Like we have 31,000 people that have used our tool, but I think they're at like 500,000. So I'm going to quote them for a second. They did this little assessment last fall of asking people what tools do they need within their home, and tools was very broad. It was everything from a Wi-Fi router to a chair, et cetera. And then what's your satisfaction with what you've currently got? By far, the biggest gap was around chairs. I'm quoting them partly because I'm clearly so biased here, but I mean, a good ergonomic chair, it's like a mattress for your day, right? Like it's supporting your body either in a healthy or unhealthy way throughout the day. Doesn't have to be a Miller or Knoll chair, but I mean, a chair that adjusts, that causes you when you sit in it to feel like your back is fully supported, and in particular, pay attention to your sacrum. So that's actually the area below your lumbar. A lot of people are super into lumbar, but if you just do this and you push your lumbar forward, that actually typically isn't what people are looking for. What they want is to rotate their sacrum, which is below it, forward, which puts your spine in a S shape. And I know this is a really weird thing to say, but most of our heads weigh about the equivalent of a bowling ball. And so if you think about balancing that on an S shape, it's doable. But when you start to think of it at the end of like a fishing pole or whatever, it becomes super problematic. So back support, make sure that you can, get your feet on the ground, that your knees aren't above your waist. But beyond that, I do think, I mean, for me, it's having a good Wi-Fi router. I have a great mesh router. That's not something that we do, but how would I possibly have a good work from home experience if I was concerned about my
Oh, yes.
Wi-Fi?
Oh, yes.
Right.
So
Yeah.
chair,
chair.
Wi-Fi. I would maybe add sound, because I think
Yes.
research showed that video conferencing is still all about sound, because we have each other in our ears, or very close even.
Yep.
Thank you for giving us these recommendations. And maybe a little thing to add, you already said it, wfh.hermanmiller.com, workingfromhome.hermanmiller.com brings you to that assessment. I just took it before the session today. It helps you reflect on your own workspace, and the fact, for example, that I don't have any flowers today, which makes me feel just a tiny little sad, and I want them, but I just don't have them today. But I always try to have flowers with me when I host, because it, as you said, it makes me feel better. It makes the air in the room better. And now, Ryan, I have to ask you why. Why in the world are you doing what you do? You're the Vice President of Global Research and Insights at MillerKnoll. MillerKnoll is a design brand collective. You just said it. There's a few brands that are part of MillerKnoll today. But what prompted your interest in future forward design? I mean, it's so specific, and led you into this position that you're in today. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I'll give you two answers. I mean, the bigger answer is that I've come to learn over 30 years. June will be my 30th year kind of in this industry, that the spaces that we inhabit deeply affect our lives, and we don't stop to think about it very often. In fact, Churchill had this quote, regardless of your feelings on Winston Churchill, that we shape our buildings thereafter they shape us. Our spaces do. And so our research today, like, we're looking at work and wherever work happens. So that's home, offices. I'm a huge advocate for good office design. But we look at healthcare facilities. We just did a really amazing workshop on the future of healthcare facilities in Chicago. Those spaces are impacting how we heal. They're impacting, by the way, our homes impact our health too. But they're impacting our care providers, schools, impacting how we learn. Like, these environments affect us, and they're not well understood. I don't have an interior design background. I'm a business person by background. I studied marketing. So I find it interesting to be able to, like, get into this stuff and then try to explain it within a business context. I'll put a pin on something more specific though, which is, so Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I live, is like the office furniture capital of the world. There's a bunch of companies here. I started with another one and came to Herman Miller in 2012. I was interested in where things were going, but I got really interested in 2004 when I talked with an organization, they happened to be in Minneapolis, who called me up and said, we just redid our offices and our employees aren't really sitting in their cubes because IT did something that they're calling wireless. Well, like, we had wireless handsets on phones back then, so we weren't using the term Wi-Fi yet. But what had happened was, good on the IT team, they installed Wi-Fi. The employees got up. They didn't leave the building. They went to the cafe, they went to the conference rooms, they went to the sofas. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this office design in particular was built on the back of desktop computing. And I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but most office designs are more historically about designing around IT networks than they are people networks. And so I remember working out of the merchandise mart in Chicago, and there was this guy that I worked with named Dennis, and he got this cordless handset on his desk phone, and he would walk about 8 feet, and then it would start to break up, and he'd come back, and he looked like a panther in a zoo, just taking advantage of whatever little autonomy that untethering gave him. And so I was like, oh, we're going to be untethered soon. So, like, what does this mean? Came to Herman Miller in 2012, specifically to lead tech research. When the world saw the first personal computer in 1968 at Stanford, Herman Miller designed the environment for it. That's how long Herman Miller's been thinking about tech. And so my job was director of future technology. How does technology impact the places that we work, heal, live, learn? And I was hooked. At that point, I was like, I'm in it. And I still find it interesting. I got a job that, if I'm bored, I'm doing something wrong, because there's never any shortage of stuff to go learn.
And you saw the future of work in 2004. You saw that coming. Now you have decades of industry experience, and let's take us to this moment today, because this moment is crazy when you think about the future of work and many other things. But particularly, I want to talk to you, of course, about the numbers that you're crunching. You host the podcast Looking Forward and are a founding member of Future Forum, which is a fascinating consortium. I just met some of the people working there at South by Southwest that is backed by Slack. in partnership with Boston Consulting Group, MillerKnoll, and Management Leadership for Tomorrow. So there's a lot of different perspectives and people putting their heads together there. And this group for the last 3 years produced the Future Forum Pulse, which is a quarterly survey. You already set the number, I think 10,000 plus desk workers around the globe are pitching in for this. And you design these amazing playbooks. And there's even a best-selling book right now from the Future Forum called How the Future Works. So there's a lot of knowledge that's just spun out constantly of this group of people surveying, and you're a part of it. So please give us a picture of what people actually want right now. What we see in the media is a very emotional, kind of like almost polarized conflict between return to the office, we don't want to go back. And I think there is city governments and corporate real estate and a lot of PR on one side, and then the other side is people deciding with their feet and leaving their jobs and going to other jobs and remote job boards blowing up. But what does the research say? What does the numbers say? Where are we with this?
Sure, it's a great question, and you're right. The headlines, and I'm specifically talking about the headlines because, as you might know, in the media, you've got typically somebody who's writing a piece and then somebody else writes the headline. And in a world of digital, it's all about getting those clicks. The headlines are very polarizing, and sometimes they're very kind of binary in their view of the world of work. Future Forum was amazing. It did recently officially come to an end, but we are continuing our collaboration with many of our partners. But it was a several-year look at how work was evolving around the world. And you're right, we surveyed 10,000 employees globally every quarter. Excuse me, not employees, but workers. In other words, they weren't our employees. And there's a couple of things that stand out. One, there's a strong desire for flexibility, and flexibility and hybrid or remote are not necessarily synonymous. So when we talk flexibility, and by the way, this is true of what we might call deskless workers as well. People working in retail, manufacturing, labs, you name it. There's a strong desire to be able to balance life's demands better than maybe we did pre-pandemic. I'm trying to remember the last quarter results, which finished in February. I think 93% of the respondents wanted more schedule flexibility. And 80 or 81% wanted more location flexibility. So location flexibility is about being able to do your work in different places. The schedule flexibility is the one that I wish if I had an even bigger megaphone, I would be talking to everybody about. I just talked with a very large organization yesterday about this. A lot of organizations, when they transitioned from being primarily in office to working during quarantine, tried to replace their in-office interactions with meetings, and specifically video meetings. And if you're somebody that has 5-6 hours of video meetings in a day, there is a rigidity there that is extremely limiting. We did a research project in 2017, separate from Future Forum, called Anatomy of Individual Work, where we looked at the mindsets of people when they want to do certain types of work. So if you're going to read something really dense, you're probably going to want to do it like in the morning before you get into your meetings. Or if you're going to do something that's super social, it might be just after lunch. Like, there's not a really easy way to predict. The point is people want some control over when they do certain types of work, and they're not feeling that. We know, and I can get into this, that from our separate research around return to office, that overscheduled meetings is one of the top reasons why people choose to not come into an office on a given day. If I got a day's long worth of meetings, I'm going to be in front of my laptop, then why would I make the commute to go just do that? I probably won't find the time to meaningfully interact with other people. I had one person tell me, I'm lucky if I can go to the bathroom, let alone socialize. Why would I take all my video meetings at the office?
So is that really the biggest deterrent from people wanting to or not wanting to come back to the office? It's not commuting. It's not the cost. It's really the fact that it's overscheduling.
It's that too. I'm gonna put a pause on that question just for a second, because I will tell you what's hindering return to office, and everything you just said is spot on. But if I just start with flexibility, the other thing that I have to mention, and to me, it's what's been on my mind the most from our Future Forum research as well as others, is people are incredibly burned out. 42% of the U.S., 41% of the U.S. workforce said they're burned out. Those that were burned out were 3.4 times more likely to be seeking a new job this year. Some of those burnout rates, Australia was at 50%. Outside of our research, the Surgeon General put out a piece in December indicating that I think it was 76% of American workers have at least one symptom of a mental health problem going on right now. So we have to look around at our colleagues and say, and our employees and our bosses and say, people are really struggling. And so there's ways of being able to help people to use flexibility to be able to reduce some burnout. And it's unfortunate that some of the return to office conversations are so contentious because, ironically, being closer to other people, being co-located, not always, but at meaningful times, having stronger relationships typically reduces burnout. When you're socially isolated, you don't feel like anybody's helping you. It's just more stress on you. So I'm concerned about the state of our mental and emotional well-being in a world of whatever this is right now. This kind of weird transition that isn't really quite hybrid. It certainly isn't maybe where everybody thought it was going. Now, to your question, Felix, there's a wide variety of reasons why offices are or are not occupied. In places like Miami, office occupancy levels are really strong. I mean, it's almost like pre-pandemic. I talked with some organizations in Cedar Rapids this week. They're like, it's pretty much the way it was. Find that in certain international markets, certainly in the Middle East, parts of Asia. And then you've got big cities typically, and big companies in big cities that are really struggling. San Francisco, Minneapolis would be the top of my list of cities that I was in 24 markets last year, kind of evaluating some of this. And it's commute cost and time. Yes, just like you said, it's overscheduled video meetings. Interestingly, when we did a survey on this in September outside of Future Form. Overall mental emotional health tied commute time and cost for the number one spot, with overscheduled meetings coming in number two. That one puzzled me because I was like, wait, people get a certain joy out of being with other people. Why is wellness and well-being considerations causing people to stay at home? But the more we dug into it and the more we talked to the social scientists, environmental psychologists, behavioral psychologists, and others that we work with, the answer was pretty simple, which is when people are struggling, they want to stay close to home and they want to stay close to the people that are near them because they're concerned about what the stress and rigors of being in the office or outside of a quote unquote safe environment might do. So those are some of the reasons. Interestingly, we included the design of the office doesn't suit my needs as one of the reasons why somebody might come in. It wasn't very high. Trust me, a lot of offices stink and they need to be significantly improved. How's that for being transparent? And that can help, but it's not like most people are sitting back going, I hate my office. It's lifestyle stuff. It's trying to create a healthy, balanced, productive, enjoyable life. And, really forceful mandates tend to be viewed with skepticism and concern. There's a pretty big transparency gap. Our Future Forum research looks at the perception of transparency. Most leaders feel like they're being transparent about their post-pandemic work policies. Not near as many employees think that they are. So there needs to be a lot better communication, a lot more empathy around the whole thing.
Wow. So it's this balance between people being overscheduled and then people not wanting to commute, and then the whole mental health thing. And I feel like there's also some sort of hen and egg problem, right? It's hard to even know where to begin because people stay home because they feel like if I'm not feeling well, I should probably work from home. But then it's also maybe a little harder to get together and create something meaningful. I heard one sentence at South by Southwest, which was on-site is the new off-site. So that if you really want people to come to the office, you have to create something off-site like, and you can't think of just scheduling a couple of meetings and expecting to show everyone up. But how do you do that? And you, in an interview with Baratunde Thurston, an amazing host, writer, activist, comedian, where you got in a really interesting conversation together. He asked how organizations can maintain a coherent culture in this sort of hybrid up and down where so many people right now are not feeling well. And you said, quote, culture isn't as important as community. And I wanted to hone in on that because this is something we have been thinking and talking about here at Remote Daily a lot. And we take this format that you're a part of now into organizations to help them create community, to connect, to belong. Why do you say this? Why do you say culture isn't as important as community?
Well, first, I will say culture is very important. Don't get me wrong. It's just a little nebulous for some people who are trying to figure out what to do. Like actionable things. So what we've found, and this is particularly true of like both employees and their immediate work team leaders or team managers, is that if you say, hey, everyone should get together to be co-located for the sake of our culture, they rightfully will kind of raise an eyebrow, because you can have a good remote first culture. You know, one of our favorite collaborators is Darren Murph. And when he was doing his thing at GitLab in particular, we had him on the podcast to highlight that, yeah, you can create a virtual culture. What is a little more actionable, and that's really why I was saying it maybe wasn't as important in that context, is if you're going to try to go improve kind of the working relationships within your team or within your company, it's really useful to start with the concept of community, because most people know what a community is. It's a series of relationships that exist either in a healthy network or unhealthy network. And you can kind of assess it. Like if we were to think about whatever your team is, how are we functioning as a community? It gets you to some pretty granular things. Now, I'm going to take 2 minutes to give you a little deep dive, all of you, on the way I think about it, which is the world of sociology has a really useful framework known as strong ties and weak ties. Came out of Stanford in 1973. Basically, strong ties are like your closest people in your life. It's your friends, it's your family, it's your partner, it's your neighbors, it's your closest coworker. I don't know who it is for you, but it's whoever you're going to talk to today or sometime this week. That's who helps you like just get through the demands of living. And then there's all these people in your life that are extended parts of your network. And it could be friends from high school that you haven't seen, or old coworkers, or it could be, cousins. But at work, it's usually all the people that are at your organization that you don't really have a reason to have a meeting with on a typical basis. And the pandemic, not just for work, but across our world, just devastated weak ties, because we quarantined for like a really long time. And then we hopped solely on Zoom calls without other types of interactions. And so what organizations often face is, it feels like instead of a healthy organizational network, a healthy community, it's like there's these pockets, and the teams are working fine together typically, but not fine across the organization. So you can't scale anything. There's redundancies in the work. There's just issues. And so I'm a big advocate, as I've told you, of remote work. I'm also a big advocate of having well-designed spaces. I remember when we first started studying remote first companies in 2012, 2013, most of them did have some sort of space. They might not have called it an office, but they were a gathering place that either allowed for those weak ties to form or be strengthened, or allowed the teams, the strong ties, to get really deep. So like I was with two of my employees, one who's in London, one who's in South Carolina, in Chicago this week. We spent a day going deep into a topic that, if I'm just being honest, like we could have done it synchronously and asynchronously digitally, but it would have taken forever. So there's just times that getting together is super helpful. Other types of work require more co-location, but I would never want to convey that culture isn't absolutely critical to an organization. But if you're trying to like improve the way you're working right now, I just think it's really actionable to say, if your group is functioning as a community, is it healthy? What can you do? Are there voices that aren't being heard? Are there quality experiences you want to have with each other? So that's what I was getting at there.
And how is MillerKnoll itself doing it? Like, how are you doing it? What kind of setup do you have to create community and walk this tightrope of hybrid work?
Well, we're struggling through it like a lot of organizations, because we integrated all these companies just like a year and a half ago. So Herman Miller, which is the organization that I came from, I led research at Herman Miller, had some companies in the family, and then we ended up acquiring Knoll and its family of companies and treated it very much like a merger. But there's more than a dozen brands now. MillerKnoll is the parent company. So like for me, we're doing research on behalf of all these companies.
Mhm.
And so to do that while having an even more distributed team. So like I've led distributed teams for a really long time, but most of our coworkers now will tell you that they've got a lot more people on their team in a lot more places, requires improvements to how we manage. It causes us to rethink the use of our own spaces. You got to take a look at your locations. I'm thankful that we have supported work from home really well. And of course, we've got good office environments, but I'll be fast. I'll be quick to say we're in the midst of that transition, just like everybody
Wow.
else. And it's always, whenever it's research, it's like physician heal thyself. But we're working every day. I'll tell you, there's a couple of things that I've been really pleased with, and I'm thankful that our team piloted this really early. I asked my employees to please block between 16 and 20 hours a week with no meetings, and to reinvest that time in either others, like just get together at our office or at one of our dealerships or at a coffee shop, or use it for heads down concentrative work, which we haven't talked about yet today. But one of the most striking results of that work from home tool that you took is that the number one issue, it was true back in July of 2020, it's still true this month, that people say they struggle with working from home, is to find consistent times of focus and concentration. And so some of the whole blocking of calendars was to give schedule flexibility around, just do what you need to do. I will say it improved the quality of our in-person interactions, but it also gave people a lot more time to just, think and concentrate. There's a few other things that I feel like we've done really well with our spaces, but that's something that we were good at before. But I think the bigger issue for a lot of organizations isn't actually so much remote versus an office. It's just distributed. Everybody's so spread out. If you've got 12 teammates in other cities, does the team leader really care if they're in the office or in their home on a given day? Or are they just struggling with the fact that the teams are so distributed? It's a different style of leadership. It's a different skill set. And we're still growing there too.
I want to ask you to go into the final lap of our conversation about the future. And I have two questions for you. One is about real estate, and the other one is about AR, VR / AI. I'll start with the real estate one. There was a headline yesterday that a 300 million office building in San Francisco is expected to sell for 60 million. You're nodding, so you saw that. What does that make you think when you see these headlines?
So the world of commercial real estate is a little complicated. The CEO of CBRE just did a really nice interview on this yesterday, but here's my take. There's a whole group of, I'm going to use commercial real estate terms, assets, buildings that are not that great, that are really going to struggle. But interestingly, really nice buildings that are on transit lines, they're in neighborhoods with bars, restaurants, i.e. they're places you want to go. They're not struggling. They're actually doing really well. They're renting for higher rental rates than they were in 2019. And so when I say that these not so great buildings, the real estate world might refer to them as Class B, Class C, but there's a bigger issue, which is if it's kind of a mediocre office space, who right now is going to go invest in that? Like if you're going to have an office, you're going to make it a good office. You're not going to have a mediocre office. The other thing that's really true, and it's more true in Europe and in Australia and a few other places than it is in the US, is that our environmental demands of our buildings are much higher than they were. And that's a good thing. We want buildings that don't emit a lot of carbon. We want buildings that have really good material chemistry to make sure that they're not, leaching things into the air. And so if you walk around New York, as an example, you'll see the little signs in the windows about the upgraded environmental standards. These buildings that are in peril right now are the ones that either can't be made into a great employee experience or they can't perform environmentally. And there's a whole bunch of people trying to figure out how to make money on what we can do with them, what they can do with them. But that's really the issue. It's like this bifurcation of the good spaces, I think will do well. In Chicago, we moved into a neighborhood called Fulton Market. It's hot. It's fun. The hotels there are cool. The bars there are cool. I love that. I was there earlier this week. We moved out of a building that is, much older, much less going on. You're going to see more and more of that happening. And that's the real story on what's happening with commercial real estate.
Wow. So we will see there is a divide happening, and it's already happening. And the buildings that have not kept up and that were never popular, they are losing out. And it reminds me of this conversation in the beginning of the pandemic. People really figured out whether they had good leadership or not in their teams and their companies. And if not, they really realized it then and might have left. So this seems to be a similar conversation. The bad buildings and the bad bosses, they are not doing well right now. And the last question I wanted to ask you actually touches on what Brandon posted in the chat. Could you comment on what excites you and concerns you about how AR and VR design to support work is developing? Is it really still all about the chair you sit in, or is there more? And I want to add a layer on top of this. I recently spoke to a friend, Raphael Gilgen, who is a future of work researcher in Germany. And he said, everything has been said about the future of the workplace. This conversation is over. We don't need to have it anymore. We need to talk about AI. That is what is really going on. So I just want to give that quote to say, I really think there in your profession, probably there's a lot of conversation right now of what the future holds that goes beyond furniture. But let's start with AR, VR, and then maybe you can give an outlook into AI and how you're thinking about that as well for your own future.
Sure. And I'll just say that there's a more comprehensive explanation in the final episode of season 2 of our podcast, because we did dive into this. So what excites me the most specifically is the role of AR in being able to augment physical experiences with digital layers. And that's true in terms of how we plan space, use space, and interact with others. And I think there's a lot of really cool things going on. Both AR and VR, just to be clear, are decades old, right? I mean, there was good application of VR 40 years ago. My favorite tech futurist is Paul Sappho. He said, never mistake a clear view for a short distance. We've seen sim worlds like Second Life, SimCity, and others. I don't personally think it's likely that we'll be working in virtual environments as an alternative to the tools we're using anytime soon. Now, having said that, I was with my friend Chris Moeller in New York last week. He's pushing the boundaries on some metaversal work experiences. And so I got to tell you, for me, we're still physical beings. So if I'm with you in a virtual world, I'm still actually sitting in a chair or standing. We're still physical beings. We haven't exactly become virtualized yet. So it causes us to think, well, if people are using tools like that, and by the way, that was one of the reasons we started working with many of our tech partners years ago, was to watch people use VR, AR, other technologies, and actually to see how the physical environment could or couldn't help. You've probably seen those Instagram reels of people on VR, like plunging into their television because that room didn't support the experience. So I've seen companies like Spatial who said, we're going to support virtual meetings in the metaverse, pivot. Now they're doing NFT art events, which is probably more akin to what people might want to do in the metaverse. Will it happen? I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. If it does, we'll be ready to support the physical needs of people that do it. But at this point, I actually think I just hope that our work from home experiences become healthier, more productive, and happier, and that these offices get redesigned to be really wonderful places of gathering. And that's probably where the priority will be.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. I love what you said about, Brandon's question. I mean, of course, there's AR and VR, but most of the people who do that are still sitting in a chair. So
they still have physical bodies. And by the way, I will tell you that back in the days of Second Life, Herman Miller was selling, Eames lounge chairs for Linden dollars in Second Life. We get it. There's a whole opportunity there. And we've been using VR and AR with our customers for at least 10 or 15 years to help visualize spaces that don't exist. So don't think I'm a Luddite. I love the technology when it's useful and when it solves a problem.
And last question, Ryan, about AI. It seems to be changing everything, at least in my world, the world of media, of communications. Is it changing the world of design at a rapid pace as well? And if so, what do you think is going to happen this year to your industry?
Well, it's been a longer trajectory. So I'll tell you, we haven't talked a lot about this publicly, but we started working with Autodesk on a generative design software platform that we've been using now for, it's been at least 5 years. In that case, you might know generative design, unlike machine learning. With machine learning, you batter something with data and then it gives you like an answer, like ChatGPT. But with generative design, you're giving it a little bit of information and it's helping to generate ideas. I think in the world of design, and that's true for product design and space design, AI can help us explore new areas. There's always like an art to the science, though. I've seen examples of AI designed work environments that when you look at it, you go, yep, looks like a computer designed that. It'll get better. We'll train the data, et cetera. But I think what it really means is more powerful tools for the people in our industry who are ready to command them. And That's exciting. I don't see it as an approach to replacing jobs. We use bots to help pay our bills. It hasn't replaced people. It's helped them to go do more meaningful work than sitting and crossing off
Mhm.
paperwork all day long. There'll be more of that in the industry, but like I said with that Paul Sappho quote, we're talking about a years and probably decades long trajectory here. And I think the most important question we can ask is, what could the technology do to either make the people who are doing the work better, happier, more effective, or to produce products or services that are of higher quality?
Ryan, you have been very gracious and very generous, I want to say, with your time. You're a busy man. I want to thank you for taking us into your world and showing us a little glimpse into the future, even. It's exciting to hear that you see AI and what many people, are so afraid of right now as a tool for growth and not a tool for replacement. And I'm also excited that you are talking about the future of work in such a positive way and giving us, a little glimpse beyond the headlines. And I also want to say the recommendations you gave about working from home are amazing. I hope that everyone who's listening, watching, can dive into this, do the assessment, and then get that light bulb or get that aquarium even, but get some plants definitely and start feeling better at working from home. I do virtual glitter. That is what we do at Remote Daily. It helps to stretch. And it is for you, Ryan, for joining us today. Thank you for the community. From much love from everybody who is joining us here right now. Ryan, I just want to pass the mic over to you one last time and ask, is there anything else that you want to share with us? Is there a way we can support you? What is your final message to this community?
Well, first of all, it's thanks because you're using these mediums, as I said, in inventive, creative, and meaningful ways. So I'm thrilled to be able to know you and do this with you. For anybody who's really interested in this topic, check out the podcast, Looking Forward, Conversations on the Future of Work. Use the work from home tool. And we have an email, insights@millerknoll.com. It goes to me. So if you have questions or we can be of help, that's what we're here to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ryan. Insights@MillerKnoll, the man behind that email. You just heard from him. Bye, everyone.
This is Remote Daily.